Hello, everybody. Welcome in to the NBA Front Office Show. Happy Friday the 13th. I don't know if that's a bad omen or what, or if we're going the other way. We're going to take this as some kind of a positive or something like that. I don't know what to do with it, but it is Friday the 13th, and we've got plenty to get to in the NBA. I'm Trevor Lane. You can find me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane, joined by Keith Smith at Keith Smith NBA. Keith, any Friday the 13th superstitions?
I don't have any superstitions around Friday the 13th, but 13 was always my preferred jersey number
That's what I was going to
in
say. Like
sports.
it's like a Steve Nash thing, right?
It for me it was that, and I'm not trying to be like cheesy and corny, but it was the number my dad wore.
Okay.
As a kid growing up in Boston, everybody wanted 33, but quite often jerseys didn't go up that high, like on youth teams and stuff. So I was always tried to be 3 or 13. So 13 was a number I always wore. No one else ever wanted it because it's like, oh, that's
Unlucky.
bad luck number and
Right.
all that stuff. So I always wore number 13. What was your number in sports?
That's what I said. Where people, people like reverse it, where they want 13 because other
Yep.
people don't want, like the Nash thing. My number was actually 14. That
Okay.
was my number. It was 5 for a little bit was my number, but primarily it was 14 was my number. And then in soccer, once I settled into okay, I'm the goalkeeper, I automatically was given number one. I didn't
Yep.
really have a choice in that. But whenever I got to pick, 14 was my go-to number, which actually kind of cool. Didn't happen on purpose, but my daughter, her first year in soccer, her the jersey she wound up randomly being assigned was 14.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's very cool. Yeah, I remember I would wear three. Three was like the other big popular number because it was like half of 33, right?
yeah.
So that was like the big thing. And then I remember asking my dad one day, I was probably like 10, and I was like, "What number did you wear?" And he's like, "I always wore 13 because it was, it was what was left over, and I would just take that number." And then I started wearing 13. So yeah.
It's a good
So
one, and now here we are, Friday the
there it
13th.
is.
Creepy stuff.
All right. Good
All
show,
right.
everybody. Enjoy the long weekend,
Yeah,
and we'll
have a great
see you
weekend,
later.
everybody. I hope you enjoyed all the NBA news.
Yep.
And we're
There it is.
let's talk. Let's start with John Collins.
Yeah.
Let's start there. John
One of
Collins
our
landing spots
favorites.
because he's once again in trade rumors. The shooting has just not come back. I still believe there's got to be whatever you want to call it, regression, positive regression, progression, whatever to the. I think he's a better shooter than what he's shown so far this season, but nonetheless, the numbers are not good. DeJounte Murray come to the Hawks. Maybe that was a factor too, just in his usage and all that. But
Well, that's I think what it is. Sorry to interrupt you,
no,
but
go ahead.
that's what I think it is. I think he gets whenever I watch the Hawks, it feels like he gets one quality touch like every 5 or 6 possessions. And I think I just don't think he has any kind of rhythm. Obviously, that team is just kind of broken uh, in general, but yeah, I just think it's kind of messy.
Yeah, I mean, 20 after shooting 36% from three last season, 39, 40% the 2 seasons before to drop to 23% this year.
Mhm.
The 3-point
On
attempts are
similar
still on
volume.
yeah, similar volume. It's just it's odd, but nonetheless, he does have suitors around the league. We've heard the Pacers is a potential landing spot for him, but we'll talk about them a bit more in a moment because we have some other Pacers news to get to. But the Utah Jazz, potentially, they're right now popping up in rumors as both buyers and sellers,
Mhm.
depending on the rumor. But what do you think about the Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt for John Collins rumored swap that's out there?
Yeah, I don't dislike it for either side, and that's not. I know people like to criticize me and say you love every move everybody makes, but I
Moves.
I really like that one would kind of be a win-win. I think I love Jared Vanderbilt. He's one of my
Mhm.
favorite guys. So I think that'd be huge for the Hawks if they could get him. Malik Beasley, another shooter, another guy who could play off their bench. I do worry you're starting to get a lot of overlap between him and Bogdanovich and AJ Griffin. I don't know how you play all those guys. Like that's probably one guy's too many. Um, and then for the Jazz side, I would love John Collins there, especially if they're committed to playing marketing as like a small forward ish, which I mean, it feels like that's just what he is now, right? He's huge, but it feels like he's just a three who can also obviously play the four. I'm all on board. Like, go
Yeah.
get him. If in this one, this is where I had somebody say, "Well, why would the Jazz want John Collins?" This is that equivalent to the Isaiah Thomas trade that Danny Ainge made when the Celtics were better than they thought that year. And then they were like, oh, we can get IT for like nothing. All right,
Right.
let's do it. Not that Vanderbilt and Beasley
No,
are
they're not
nothing
nothing.
by any means, but we can kind of snag John Collins, and then we've got a guy who's under control for the next few years as well beyond this year. I that's the kind of thing. I think it's funny. I'm going to write a piece for Spot Track soon where I put every team in the category of they're either buyers, sellers, either or neither. The Jazz are firmly in that either camp, like you were kind of alluding to, because it could be kind of they do both, right? It could be we add some stuff, but we also move some guys along, and I think they're going to be active whenever things do pick up here. But I don't hate the idea of John Collins in Utah at all.
Yeah, I don't either. I think I like him in Indiana with his fit
I love that
a lot better. But I don't hate the idea of Utah. But let's jump to Indiana, another team that's rumored to be in the mix for John Collins, putting him next to Miles Turner with Halliburton. I mean, that could be really, really interesting. And suddenly the Pacers could, I mean, they've been good this year, but suddenly they could look really dangerous if you had John Collins to the mix. So how do you get John Collins to the Pacers if they want to get into that mix? And suddenly, again, a team that we thought was going to be a seller flips to become a buyer here with Indiana.
Yeah, I think for the Pacers, the important thing to remember is they're sitting on 27, almost 28 million in cap space. So they're in a spot where making moves is very easy for them. It's something that they can just kind of do. So I think we're in a position for them where it turns into, all right, we can send you a first round pick and Chris Duarte. I know we're going to talk about that in a bit here, but we could do that because they don't need to match salary. Now, if you take Collins in and that eats up most of your cap space, that eliminates the renegotiation and extension possibilities for Miles Turner. That may not be a thing. We're hearing, mixed reports. Turner himself came out and said, we'll hold on. Like, I didn't say I'm out on an extension with the Pacers. So you could also do a standard extension. You don't have to do the renegotiation and extension. Right. Your benefit to doing that is, because I don't know that a lot of people fully get that, is if you did that with Miles Turner, they're about 15 million under the salary floor. So that's money you have to pay out anyway. Let's say we get to the end of the month and it's like, yeah, we're not going to eat a bunch of salary. We're not doing X, Y, and Z. You got to pay that money by the end of the year anyway. So give it to Turner now. And then let's say you say, yeah, we want to do a 4-year, $80 million extension. I'm just throwing that out there.
Sure.
You could then turn that into actually a 4-year, $65 million extension. Because what you do is you give Turner the $15 million this year. They basically say, hey, you're still getting 80 million. You're just getting a bunch of it right now.
Right.
And then we lower your number moving forward. So it's
sense.
a rare thing that comes up, but with that. But so to go back to John Collins, yeah, I think this is the kind of move. If you're not going to do that with Turner, or you don't have the idea of like, hey, we're going to eat a whole bunch of big salary for other stuff, that'd be good. And that's a fit for them. And the Pacers, they would be one of the teams that loves that he's, as long as they view his money as not negative, that he's under contract for a few years, because then they don't have to deal with it down the line. So, yeah, I got super excited this morning when I saw, the Pacers were in on him, because I'm kind of like, oh, man, that's fun. Him, Halliburton, Mathurin, Turner, like, whoever's left over, the wing group. Aaron Nesmith has shown some stuff. Like, yeah, that could be a fun group.
And then the Pacers are reportedly open to trading Chris Duarte, so that could, open up some things. He's one of those older young players, or what? I think he's 25?
25, yeah.
At this point, I mean, which
in year 2,
in year 2 in the NBA, which is not a typical thing, but still, I mean, shooter, hasn't had a ton of opportunities with the Pacers.
Shooter, well, like I did quotes because he's not doing much shooting this year. Well, he's doing a lot of shooting. He's not doing a lot of making.
I mean, I think there's still the perception that he's a better shooter than what he's showing right now, right? That at some point the averages are going to come back around, right?
Yeah.
So I still think there's going to be a market for him. Now, do you think the Pacers are doing the right thing here to move on this early from Duarte?
I think that this is now a challenge of their roster construction. He is a 2-3. They have Buddy Hield, Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, and Benedict Mathurin all in that 2-3 line already. So that becomes your tricky spot for the Pacers, is carving out enough time. Duarte's had injury issues. He got hurt in his rookie year, missed a good amount of time. He's missed a bunch. He's missed about half of the games this season. I think this season it's playing time is down, injuries. He just has no rhythm. He looks all out of sorts when he does play. He was a starter for most of last year. Get kind of, hey, do all you can eat, just handle it and do what you got to do. So I think this is a chance to say, if we can recoup a lottery protected pick and get a first round pick back for him, then let's do it. We'll clean up our rotation a little bit, add another pick to our stash moving forward, and off we go. I actually posited today, I threw it out there. I kind of like him for Boston. They could use another wing. His contract is small enough; it fits into the trade exceptions that they have left over. One of those is almost out. It's Juancho Hernan Gomez, $6.9 million. That expires next week because they made that trade early last year ahead of the deadline. So he's a guy who can fit there, but he's very attainable because he's on a very reasonable contract. So, and you get 2 more years of team control. And if you're the Celtics, you don't necessarily care that he's a little older, right? Because you're trying to win right now.
Right.
So it doesn't, necessarily. It's not like you're in the business of, hey, let's develop a 19-year-old prospect. Like, you're trying to win today.
He's a young player without having to feel like, hey, we're break out the training wheels because this kid's
Correct.
19 and we got to figure out, we got to show him how to do life and how to adult and all that kind of stuff. Like, you don't necessarily have to go through all of that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing necessarily for young players to have to go through, but at 25, there's some advantages that do come with that. As much as we look at that as, oh, it's a negative, he's 25 years old, he's in his second year, but there's some positives that come with the fact that he's a little bit older as well. If you're a team like the Celtics that's looking to win right now. Let's talk a little bit about Tyrese Halliburton, who's out now for 2 weeks. Again, sticking with the Pacers, dealing with multiple injuries, but he's been fantastic. He's been absolutely amazing this year. And let me ask you this: the second fan All-Star voting returns are in. I know we already.
I was looking for your name on there. You must have just slipped out of the top 10.
Well, yeah, I mean, Lakers Nation is strong. They tried to get me up there in that list, but has not happened yet. Halliburton shows up at number 8 on guards in the East. What's more egregious, Halliburton not being higher up on the list, or Jalen Brunson not even making the list?
Yeah, and Jalen Brunson behind his own team,
behind Derrick Rose. Yeah,
which is Derrick Rose doesn't even play anymore. He's completely out of the Knicks rotation. So yeah, I'm going to give it a tie. They're both pretty bad. I think if we get down to it, there's a chance Tyrese Halliburton could be the starting guard in the All-Star game. He's a lock to make the All-Star team. Just in case people don't know, 20.2 points per game, 10.2 assists, which leads the NBA, 1.8 steals, and 4 rebounds per game. He's on 48, 40, 88 shooting splits. So
people don't understand how good he is. I think in part because he's in Pawnee. Like, people just don't see him enough.
Yeah. And when they do kind of catch him, it's like you're catching highlights, and he's not necessarily the most highlighty player.
Yes.
Right. He's not throwing down big dunks. I mean, he's just good. He's just good all the time. So
it's a little bit like very not a similar play style or anything, but it reminds me a little bit of Andre Miller from back in the day, where people just never really quite caught on to like how good this guy, because he's not getting all these crazy flashy highlights. He's not throwing down dunks. He's not hitting step back threes or whatever. And so he kind of became perennially underrated. I think we kind of get that effect, a different reason and all of that, but with Halliburton.
Yeah, Halliburton's a good test for like who actually watches games, right? Like among like your friend group, like you throw out Halliburton, like yeah, he's okay. Like you're not really watching then, like if you don't know how good he is. But yeah, it's going to be hard, and they're going to go through it a little bit right now. They're right on that borderline of being a short playoff team. They're even with the Knicks. They're both 23-19, tied for 6th in the East. Their challenge is Pacers could have been looking at, with another good couple weeks, they might have put a little bit of pressure on Philly, maybe even Cleveland. Now it's going to be, all right, can we stay ahead of Miami? They're not going to dip all the way out of the play-in picture, but this 2-week stretch could be the difference between we made the play-in versus we got into the actual playoffs itself.
Yeah. That's what could be at stake here if you are the Pacers, and so it's unfortunate the timing of this with Halliburton, this injury, but again, I guess it could have been worse, right, than losing him for 2 weeks.
And if they're going to lose a player to position, they've got a bunch of different guards there, so you're at least somewhat covered in that respect.
Speaking of guards, this is fun. D'Angelo Russell had
So,
some comments.
sorry.
He said something. We talked about this before we came on the show. What's the quote? The one that stood out from.
The one that got me
I
was,
don't have it in
can't,
front of me.
I can't stop laughing. I have to find it. I'll find it in a second here. Here it is. This was this was in an interview with Jake Fisher of Yahoo Sports. D'Angelo Russell is no. This was Jake's tweet. D'Angelo Russell is no stranger to trade chatter. And then Russell's quote was, "You either take advantage of me and my ability, or f up the opportunity with
That's
me.
right.
It's as simple as that." I mean, just an unbelievable quote. Like that's we talk about irrational confidence, guys, on the court. Like that's like irrational confidence just in life. Like I mean, good for him, but oh boy,
Well,
I don't
okay,
know about all that.
and then he followed up with talking about Anthony Edwards, right? Talking about Anthony Edwards, he says, "Well, I'm an alpha as well." You know what I mean? And I feel like I'm better than a lot of shooting guards, and I'm better than a lot of point guards. Like after he said I'm an alpha as well, like I'm expecting in my head the word bro gets put in.
Yeah, right.
And
That wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, I'm an alpha, bro. Come on, bro.
yeah, right.
Come on, bro.
But
Yeah,
that's like there's obviously there's a little bit of he's stretching a bit, but he's also not a horrific basketball player
no,
or anything
yeah,
like that. Maybe he's a bit overly confident, but nonetheless, it is an interesting situation to look at for the Wolves. He's on an expiring contract. Doesn't sound like they're coming to terms on an extension. So, do we see D'Lo getting moved? And what teams are reading this saying, "Oh, sign us up. Let's get on board with that."
yeah. Well, it did the whole alpha thing just immediately brings back the three alphas vibe from Chicago, Rondo, Wade, and Butler. Right, we're three alphas, here, and that worked out wonderfully. But yeah, this is tough. I don't know that anybody's like super psyched now. Like, yeah, let's go get D'Angelo Russell and like bring
Yeah,
him in here and have to give him a new contract or whatever. It's weird. Somebody asked me just yesterday. They're like, "What do you think happens with him?" And I was like, "I don't think he gets traded," but I was like, I don't know if I was Minnesota if I'd be going all in to extend him either.
yeah.
I don't know that he's the point guard they need. Not you got two bigs, you got to make sure he get touches, and you got to make sure Edwards is your leading shot volume guy going forward. I don't know that Russell being a score first guy is the guy you need right now.
He's got real talent. I mean, he's not
Sure,
again, he's not a
yeah,
bad player,
no,
but like I'm concerned if I'm a team that's trading for him and he knows he's got to get his next contract, yeah, you got to be a little bit concerned about him gunning for that contract and what's going to happen with
mhm.
that. What's his play, especially if his mindset is, well, I'm on par with Anthony Edwards or whatever, whatever he's hinting at there. I don't like that leads to concerns that are you going to be able to come to terms on a new deal if you do trade something for him? And then for the Wolves, it's what do we want to pay him on this next deal? It's going to be an interesting situation to watch in the next 3 weeks or so till we've got the trade deadline coming up. That I think is for sure. I don't know if they ultimately move him, like you said. I don't know how many teams would be interested or willing to give up what they would need to in order to get him, but I don't really know like what next year looks like. For it feels like it's so up in the air for D'Angelo Russell. Like, where is he? What does his contract look like? All of that feels like just completely up in the air at this point.
Here's a question I'm going to give you. He's on a $31.4 million contract this year. We fully understand there was part of that was artificially inflated
Yep.
because he was part of the sign and trade with KD to the Warriors and all that stuff. But 31.4 million. What's his first year salary next year? Is it going to be more or less than half of that?
Oh, so is it going to be more or less than
Let's call it
15,
15,
15 and
16.
change?
Yeah.
The cap is going up. He's a 17-6 player this year. He's been a double-digit scorer every year in the NBA. Like,
Doesn't really play a lot of
doesn't
defense.
play a lot of defense, shooting 36% from three. Man. I'm gonna say it winds up being I think it winds up being more, but
Kind of where
I think somebody's gonna talk themselves into him.
I'm going to put it in the 20 million range as part of a sign and trade.
That would make
That
sense.
sells him somewhere else. So that's
Yeah.
just because Minnesota is so limited in how they can improve their roster
Yeah.
next season anyway. But yeah, yeah. I mean, hey, keep doing your thing, D'Lo. I
If
guess. Like,
if it's let me say it, if it's lower, it's going to be a short-term deal because he's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
if he winds up somewhere, you know, the money dries up, he's
He
going to
gets
take
caught like the Schroeder, like
yeah,
probably not quite the Schroeder world, but like it has to take the mid level.
yeah.
Like, yeah, it'll be 1 year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he'll do like a 1+1 player option at a mid level or something if the money
Yeah.
drives up around the NBA.
Yep.
That's what could happen.
No, that's a good call.
The Atlanta Hawks, Kyle Korver promoted to assistant GM for the Hawks. Rising on up and big changes in Atlanta. That roster might need some big changes too. But
Yep.
um,
I think these moves, Travis Schlenk out, which we should say now, he's
yeah,
out. Fully out, like it came out. Sam Amick of the Athletic reported it's not. There was this whole he's going to be an advisor and he'll still be consulted. Like it sounds like he's completely gone.
yeah.
Uh, Landry Fields is now the GM running the basketball operations. Kyle Korver. I think these are precursors to all right. Let's start building the team the way we want.
Right. Yep, that's typically what winds up happening is when you get a new group coming into power, whatever the title is, what do you want to call them? GM, president of basketball operations,
Yep.
whatever it is.
Decision maker.
Yeah, decision maker. When you get that person, that position, that group, whatever changing over, they come in, they're not married to the players that are on the team at that point.
Yep.
They want to put their own guys in, have their own playing style, sometimes their own coaching staff. Change usually comes with that. And it's only natural, right? I mean, you come in and you were brought in for a reason because things weren't going well before. So you can't just continue that, keep the status quo and keep doing what obviously wasn't working. And you have to have something that you can point to and say, look, this is what I did. This is how I changed things.
Yep.
It's same thing in a lot of walks. Like you get a new manager at your job or something
Sure.
like that, right? Changes
Sure.
always fall. I always think of Parks and Rec when Ron Swanson winds up with a circular desk where he just spins around.
That's what an underrated good show.
Oh, it's so
Here's
great.
my thing. You can only really catch it in like the full reruns
Yeah.
on Comedy Central, but early in the morning, like it needs to be like then The Office is on for like 20 hours in a row. And I love The Office.
Yeah.
But like let's mix Parks and Rec in there on one of the days. Like you've got 7 seasons of a show or whatever it is.
So I've
Like,
got
no.
YouTube TV and you can pick like shows that are your shows to like
Nice.
pop. So it winds up because on TV they just regularly air the whole season.
Mhm.
So I can at any point like call up any of the shows. So
That's
that's a
perfect.
frequently like a go-to where oh, we've got half an hour, we're gonna eat lunch or whatever like that. Okay, just pop on an episode of Parks and Rec. It's great. And The Office is obviously in the mix as well. But yes, totally
Our
underrated
lunchtime show is Friends, and then like
show.
we like our running joke is like we're meeting friends for lunch. So then it's like we actually people think we leave the house, so which rarely happens either.
That's
Yeah.
literally what my wife falls asleep to every single night
Friends.
is Friends. She puts on Friends in the bedroom and goes to sleep. And that's she knows all of
Friends,
it.
there's parts of Friends that has not aged well.
Sure.
We'll just leave it there. But I mean, that's all those shows are.
Yep.
You know, there's things that haven't aged well. But on this, last thing I'll say on the Hawks front office maneuvers, this happened roughly a month out from the trade deadline. There's stuff going to happen in Atlanta. Otherwise, you could have waited and let this run. This is we didn't want Travis Schlenk making the moves. You have full control to do what you think you need to do. And I don't know that it's all going to be, let's try to fix this season. It might be a little, let's rebalance. Let's get ourselves to a better place moving forward.
Right. Exactly. All right. Let's jump over to the Washington Wizards, who are totally, definitely not willing to trade Kyle Kuzma. They're going to keep him. They are dead set. They are determined to hang on to Kyle Kuzma unless you increase your offers.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's exactly what this is. We're a month out from the deadline. We don't like any of the offers we've gotten. We're planning to keep him. I mean, he didn't openly say I'm not re-signing here, but he came pretty close to saying that about 2-3 weeks ago when he talked about his next contract. He's not doing an extension. There's no way that happens.
No.
You'd leave way too much money on the table because of the veteran extension rules. This is not a Kyle Kuzma criticism by any means. He's blossomed into a really nice player, could help a whole bunch of teams. He's going to get paid nicely, but this is idiotic if this is the Wizards' plan. Because unless your goal is let's always be somewhere between 6 and 12 in the Eastern Conference, which it seems like that's what they just are
mission accomplished.
Want to be, resign Kyle Kuzma, by all means, because then that'll fine. You'll then that's where you'll be. Like you said, mission accomplished. You'll be right in that range every single year.
Yeah, I mean, and especially if they have a sense that hey, he's gonna go this
You
summer,
have to.
you gotta move him.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
gotta, and it wouldn't shock me. Now he's talked about how he's been able to spread his wings in Washington and all that, and that's true. But if you have a sense that he's looking elsewhere, then you got to be. One of the worst things you can do, like signing a bad contract, is awful. It's completely crippling to a franchise. You look at, obviously my first thoughts were Luol Deng, Timothy Mozgov, right? I mean, that can be brutal, but right up there with one of the most damaging things the team can do is lose a valuable player to free agency, and you get nothing in return. There's no compensatory picks or anything like that. They're just gone. And if you're not a team that has cap space where suddenly that frees up money to spend, then you really don't have any way to replace that player. So you have to always be aware of what the player's future thinking is. Are they going to stick around? And if they're going to leave, you've got to get value for them.
I did go on mute because the dog is like frantically trying to get into the closed office door here. Yeah, but I completely agree. He is, you can't. If you think he's leaving, you have to trade him because otherwise you lose him for nothing. And then now that's just opportunity lost, and that's just that's just a bad decision. So yeah, and he's probably one of the more likely to move players on the deadline because one, you have to be good enough that people want you.
Yeah.
You have to be good enough that teams are going to give up something for you, and you have to be on a tradable contract. At 13 million, everybody can get in the mix for Kyle Kuzma with ease. So yeah, I think I'm gonna put it this way. I'll be very, very surprised if he's a Wizard on February 10th. I can't see that happening unless they rip off a 10-game win streak between now and then. And like, holy crap, they're a playoff team. But that would also equally shock me.
Yes, indeed. The Kings, not a surprise here, open to moving Richaun Holmes. He's not a bad big to have. He had some good seasons for them when he was their guy, but now they've got Sabonis, and that's clearly going to, take up most of the minutes as he should. So the Kings are willing to move Richaun Holmes. I don't know what kind of value he gets out there on the market. The big position is a little bit devalued, across the league. Particularly if you're not necessarily a knockdown like 3-point shooter or anything like that. But yet Holmes is still good. He's still a good player. I guess it comes down to this. How comfortable do you feel if your team has to make Richaun Holmes your starting center? Do you feel like that, like you've got your center, you've got your guy for the next 2 to 3 years, or do you feel like you need to upgrade?
No, he's my starting center, but he's my 5th or 6th best guy. I feel fine. Then like, okay, that's fine. Like he's, suited for that role. But if he's like my starting 5 and he's like my 3rd best player, I'm not feeling so hot about that. Then I'm a little concerned about where that's going. And I think for him, it is I look at it as it's all been circumstance, right? He had that, unfortunately horrible situation at the end of last regular season for the Kings where he basically left the team for a while and was accused of a bunch of stuff that hopefully I'm remembering this correctly came out that he wasn't actually guilty of, and he got that all cleared up. Then on top of that, the team trades for Sabonis, who's now kind of a franchise centerpiece player, along with De'Aaron Fox. And then he's not in the rotation, so it's just one of those things. He probably needs a fresh start somewhere else. Probably, there's a whole bunch of teams I think he could really help. I think a team like maybe the Clippers should get in on him because he would really help them. Behind Zubac. Yeah. I think that would be really good. That gives you, because they just don't have much behind Zubac. So I think the important thing though with the Kings side of this is if you started to really look at it, just for guys who are not in their regular rotation, you could get to very easily about $25 million in matching salary in trades. And that puts you in the range to get anybody.
And not touch your rotation.
And you could do that and still stay way under the luxury tax amount because they're about $17 million clear of the tax. I wrote about this for Spot Track. There's 6 teams. If you want to check it out, it's on my Twitter timeline. These teams that should kind of go all in right now because they're pretty good and they have a real shot at either all in on the playoffs. A couple of them are all in on maybe making a finals run that have a ton of room underneath the luxury tax. And it's kind of that becomes in a way like use it or lose it's money.
Mhm.
So go add a little bit of salary if you're the Kings. Go get yourself another guy. Get yourself another bench shooter. Go get yourself another wing who can play. Another kind of forwardish size guy, a 4-5. I think would be huge for them just to give Sabonis a little break there. But yeah, it's one of those things where I want to see them do something because they're so close.
They're
They're
right
like
there.
this feels like the year, right? Where like they could do it. And I don't can they hold off Phoenix and the Warriors from pushing them down into the play? And we'll see. We're gonna find out. But I think there's a chance that they can. And if you can bolster that chance, why not do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Final thing here, the Nets had a two-way swap with a few two-way players. If you want to close us out with that one.
Yeah, so the Nets waived Alondas Williams. He really got no run with the Nets in the NBA. He was mostly a G League player. He's a guard. They brought in Drew Smith, another guard, in place. I thought when I saw Alondas Williams get waived, they might go for a slightly bigger player, just with KD being out for probably will ultimately be at least a month or so. So I thought that's where they were going to go, but they went with another guard. What you're seeing right now is two-way contracts. Last day to sign a guy to a two-way is January 15th, so only a couple days away. So what's happening is teams are making those swaps now, where if it's we like this guy a little bit more than the guy we have, let's make those swaps. So we wouldn't be surprised if we see a couple more two-way moves go down here between this. Now, don't get that confused with converting a two-way player. That can
Mhm.
happen all the way through the end of the regular season, but the 15th is the last day to sign a player to a two-way contract. So might have a couple more moves like this that are probably relatively minor, but every once in a while they end up mattering
Yep.
because some of these two-way guys do pop into becoming regular rotation guys.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Something worth keeping an eye on as we, a couple of days away from the 15th here. So something of note. All right. I think that heads us off into the weekend. Glad that we got some good trade talk in there, especially as we're slowly getting closer to that trade deadline coming up on February 9th. Expect to hear even more trade chatter as we get closer. But thank you everybody for joining us. Make sure that you have a fantastic weekend. And of course, subscribe to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel and podcast feed over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Till next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.